Hello and Assalamu alaikum. I'm Hasnat Ahmed, and our today's lecture is about one of the most important topics considered in sociology, that is the elements of culture in sociology. Let me request you that please do subscribe my channel so that I can accelerate the next topics in front of you. Let's go ahead with our topic of today. So, culture is basically considered as one of the most finest aspect of any of the society, and there are some of the characteristics, there are some of the components, factors, or elements which altogether makes it in all of the society. There are some of the consensus upon some of the very important aspects or the factors which actually do together, which do combine together, make a culture. For example, some of these are values, your norms, your folkways, your mores, your symbols, and language. There are so many other things as well in a culture which can take part in making up of a culture, but these are some of the most important ones which are considered as necessary to elaborate the elements of culture. So let's go with the values. Values are some of the most important standards in any of the society. These are the culturally defined ideas about what is important and are central to a culture. There are certain societies with some of very important core considerations in any of their practices, which they do consider as the most important ones in order to live their lives. So, values are those ideas which actually are the standards for discerning what is good and just in a society. These are basically the phenomena which guide us to what to practice and what not to practice, and what are important in our lives and what may not be important in our lives. Actually, values delineate how a culture should be. As we already had discussed, that these are the ideas or these are the standards, so they will direct us, they will guide us that how a culture should be. It can either be a good one, it can either be a bad one, but according to the understanding of any specific society, what a society will consider as important, and just for them, they will practice those standards in their lives. Values are deeply embedded and critical for transmitting and teaching a culture's belief. They are so crucial in our lives that they are strongly embedded, they are strongly bonded in our lives. They make us cohesive with each other, not only with each other, but the other communities, with the other groups of people, or with the other societies, which we do consider as important. So these are critical for transmitting and teaching a culture's belief. If we want to interact with other cultures and they wanted to know us, these are the values basically which we transmit into the domestic cultures, as well as according to the others cultures belief as well. So beliefs, what are these beliefs now? Beliefs are the tenets or convictions that people hold to be true in any of the society, what people do believe that these are the righteous things, these are the good ones, or these are the just ones, and that would be considered as the tenets or convictions. And in other words, these are the beliefs which they do pretend not only in that specific society but in other societies as well. For example, these are their practices. For examples, in some of the countries, being justice, being empowerment of the woman, and to propagate the values like respecting elders or to be kind with the younger ones. These are some of the beliefs which people do practice in order to pretend their values. But this is also a fact that not everyone in a culture shares identical values. They might differ in terms of their practices. It purely depends upon the proportionate of the society, where people are in different age groups, where people are in different mind setups. There are different subcultures as well, and they evolve some of the practices according to their own understanding, the group understanding as well. So It is quite possible that in a single culture, people may not share identical values. With some of the values, they are very strong, and some of the values they may reject as well. So, people or some of the groups hold more tightly to certain values while rejecting others. What they consider, as we had already discussed, that some of the values are considered as important. So, to those important values, they might attach very strongly. They are intact with those values, whereas those values which they do not believe as the important ones, they might reject them. Again, it varies society to society. In some of the European cultures, some of the things are quite good for them, but in some of the traditional cultures, the values may coincide with those values that were practiced previously in the European or American or in any of the contemporary societies' culture. So people only practice those values which they do considered as just for them. So there may also be a mismatch between the ideal and the real culture. This is also important to know that what are these kind of phenomena, ideal and real culture. The values and norms claimed by a society. Let me tell you that there are always two typologies of culture in practices in the societies. One is that is claimed by the society and is called as the ideal culture, whereas the other one is that is actually in practice, which is the present era's culture, which is the present culture of any of the society and will be known as the real culture. We can further elaborate these phenomena. Like ideal culture refers to those practices, values, and norms that society is supposed to follow or desire to achieve. As these are the standards, we had already discussed that the values or the standards or the principles of the society which they wanted to get practiced by the members. So these are the standards which they wanted to achieve, they desire to achieve as well. So it refers to those goals that our societies consider as ideal or worth aiming for them. So we see that what we want to see, and we say that what we want to say instead of what the actual interpretation of the society can be like. That is what is being transmitted in ourselves, in our personalities, or internalized in our ideologies by the previous generations. What they considered as importance, they do propagate in our personalities. Whereas the real culture refers to those practice and norms that culture actually follows. They can be the same at times. This is quite possible that at once the ideal and the real culture are the same. But the ideal culture seems to be more static, optimistic, and glowing, distinguishing itself from the real culture. There is always a difference between the ideal and the real culture, or in some of the things, people do want it to be separated their ideal culture from the real culture because it will be the one that is so peculiar, that is so pure in their understanding that makes them different from other cultures or other societies or other communities. So, in some of the times, people do much feel much cohesive towards their ideal culture, but it is again quite possible that ideal and real culture may be the same in any of the society, like in some of the European or American or in any contemporary society it is possible that their ideal and real culture will be the same one. Whereas a society like Pakistani society, there will always be a mismatch between the ideal and the real culture. As traditional culture that is closely associated to the religion, the social normative structure of the society is the claim of the society, whereas in terms of practices, it is an amalgamation of the both one. In some of the areas, the urban areas, maybe the modernization supersede the traditional culture even. So the idealized and resolute value system that controls perfect behavior, real culture involves a value system which is adaptable and serves as a set of preferred guidelines. Real culture will always be the one that will be the practice of the time, that will be actually practiced at that specific moment. So are the norms. Norms are also considered as one of the most important element in any of the culture, and these are derived from our societal values, the standards that society made basically, and for us to practice the norms. These norms constitutes the shared rules or expectations specifying appropriate behavior in various situations. Norms are those principles, those procedures, those rules, those regulations, those expectations actually imposed by or propagate by the values of the society in order to make us able to behave at a specific behavior in various situations. But society do expect us that if in any of the situation this should be the behavior, norms will direct us that you are supposed to behave in that way what society wanted to do. So these are the rules basically now. These are the principles, these are the regulations, these are the guidelines, these are the procedures that are being set by the people of the society for their incumbents, for their civics, in order to set the society's order or its equilibrium. So, society needs norms to maintain its stable social order. Why do these norms are necessary? So that the society could remain in an order. Society, if wanted to be harmonious, if wanted to be in an equilibrium, these norms are very necessary to be practiced by its members in any of the situations. It's very important and very interesting to understand that norms direct and prohibit one's behavior. They are not only in a single dimension procedure, but they can be practiced in both of the ways. They can direct us to do so many things, and at the same times they can prohibit our behaviors as well in some of the certain situations. What to do and what not to do, again, that are basically directed by the values in the form of now norms we are supposed to practice. So norms, how they are being understood by the members of the society. The next question is how they are being understood by the members of the society. They are enforced, and how they are enforced, they are through a process of internalization. Now this internalization, again, internalization is what that we how we perceive these norms into our personalities. They can either be a direct enforcement, they can either be an indirect enforcement or the internalization process. For example, our parents, our socialization, these are some of the ways to internalize the norms into our personalities, where we can directly be in internalize as parents will socialize us. They will told us how to be as a positive member of the society while living in that specific place, whereas indirectly we can observe them what they were doing, what they are doing, and what they wanted to do in the future. That might be the way forward of our personality as well. They become part of who we are as an individual and as culture. Norms basically will pretend, norm basically will show us as a part of the culture in any of the society. For example, our interpretations, our practices, our actions will denote that it is not only the individual's action but as well as the holistic culture of the society as well. For example, any specific group's actions may will call be the culture of the whole society. There are a lot of examples in this way. If someone is doing positive acts, those positive actions may be considered as the culture of the society. And at the same time, if somebody is not doing positive actions and maybe disrupting the international or the global culture, that specific community or group or society will be considered as vice versa. So, external social enforcement in the form of both positive and negative sanctions is also critical. It's not only the internalization of the norms, whether directly or indirectly, but at the same time, some external constraints or external social enforcement in the form of positive or negative sanctions is also critical. Those sanctions are basically the instruments or the tools or the strategies which are being applied on the members of the society in order to imply the norms upon them by all the means. They can either be the positive ones in terms of rewards. For example, if somebody is doing a job, there are certain ways to make him boost through certain upgradations, like salary upgradation, like the promotion, in order to make him as a positive member or the positive employee of that specific environment. And as well as if somebody is not doing good, depromotion or such kind of strategies may also be applied on that situation, so that that person may get himself or fix his that specific attitude or to apply those norms upon himself. Norms define how to behave in accordance with what a society has defined as good, right, and important. And most of the members of society adhere to them. Let me tell you that these norms are basically the consensus of the members of the society to live up their lives. Maximum portion of the society are basically adhere to these rules or expectation which applied upon them by the previous generation or the previous structure of the society. So in any of the situation, members of the society wanted themselves to be in the normative structure of the society. So norms can further be divided into folkways and mores. These are also considered as the types of norms as well. But altogether, we explain here in elements of culture with these phenomena. So, what are the folkways? Well, while practicing the norms, they are basically important to understand and the social reaction to breaches. Their breaching reactions may vary in strength and intensity. Some of the norms, if may be violated in any of the society, they might not be considered as some serious violations of the rules or the expectations of any society, whereas some might be. So, folkways are the weak norms that are often informally passed from the previous generations. These are some of the expectations, these are some of the rules that might be transferred from the previous generations informally. Again, these are the internalizations into one's personality, and as I had discussed previously in the norms, that the internalization can either be the direct one or the indirect one. So what we had been learned by our parents, by our educational system, by our religion, by mass media, or some of the other things, indirect guidelines as well, that will be some of the things to understand how to practice the norms. They often deal with everyday behaviors and manners. Now, in order to understand the folk ways, the best example can be the manners or day-to-day behaviors. As for example, I had always tell my students that in some previous times, we are so closely bonded and so closely cohesive with our neighbors, with our loved ones. But after the urbanization, industrialization, and urbanization, life has become that much compact and that much fast that we may not have enough times to attend certain gatherings. Previously, that those were considered as very important. So these are some of the these are now has become some of the folk ways, which if may be practiced will be considered as good. But if somebody is not able to do these kind of things in these days, in these fast urban days, it might not be considered as a serious violation. So folkways are learned from others as well as through direct guidance and reinforcement. As I had told you earlier, some of the people are still in some of the societies who are so tightly intact with their normative structure, just because of the fact that their systems, their institutions like family, like religion, make them like that way. They're also learned through encountering others' reactions and on behaving inappropriately, like the manners we are discussing or the behaviors. These are the things which we learn from encountering the reactions of other as well, like our elders. If we are doing something inappropriate, their reaction will strengthen our next behavior. If it will be the positive one, obviously we will do the same in the future. And if it will be the negative one, we will prohibit or we will not repeat the same action in the future as well. So violation of folkways are not considered as severe breaches of great moral significance, as violation of the folkways do not cause serious harms to the social standards. They dislike like ignoring that specific behavior rather than prolonging that specific discussion or that specific behavior. People just wanted to ignore that specific behavior. As that specific behavior do not cast any of the significant moral value. So in any of the society, people wanted just to get out of that specific situation. No harsh penalties for the violation of folkways in any of the society, though they, as I had discussed, that some of the societies in some of the communities or some of the tribes are still so strongly entitled with their normative structure or their value-based system. And there are certain sanctions, the social sanctions maybe, like social boycott and such many strategies may be applied upon the individual in order to get themselves back towards that specific society's social structure. But a majority of the society has a consensus that nowadays folkways are hard to achieve. So they might be ignored in many of the societies. But mores are the ones which are purely opposite to that of the folkways. Like we had discussed that folkways are the weak norms, your weakly held norms of the society. Mores, which are pronounced as more is, are strongly held norms, which cannot be neglected by any of the society, and societies have a consensus upon its practices. Mores may not be violated in any of the society as the standards set by the society. They presented deeply held standards of what is right and wrong. In across all the societies, prohibition on murder, robbery, and assault, or some of the immoral crimes, even are all the examples of mores across many of the cultures. Let me tell you that as I had discussed earlier, that folkways and mores are the types of norms. So, in order to maintain the social order or to maintain the social justice in any of the society, mores are so important to be practiced, because if a society wanted to a systematic structure to be practiced by its members, mores must be confirmed by the members of the society. If they are failed to do so, or social structure is failed to make them do so, in that specific society, the situation will be an anarchic one, and there will be no system may be practiced at that specific time if mores are strongly be violated. They are considered morally significant breaches and are often formalized as law. Uh, Again, it is important to understand that where are the laws came from. These laws are also been came from the more society's structure, and mores are basically the written codes of the society when do become the laws. Or laws in general applications are the written codes. So in any of the societies, mores are not only be strengthened by the social structure, by the social authorities, but also by the law and enforcement agencies. Like in all the societies, if somebody is going to murder someone, it's not only the specific community who's going to condemn or to make him a penalty or her penalty upon this specific act, but law will also be enforced its authority. So mores are being strengthened by the laws of any of the society as well. It's also important to understand that some of the mores are so strongly held that they have been termed as taboos. Again, taboos are also a widespread phenomena in across all the societies, whether they are the traditional ones or the modern ones. This is a kind of phenomena which equally existed in across all the societies. So, what are these taboos? Are norms that are so objectionable that they are strictly forbidden. These are some of the norms which are considered as objectionable and they are strictly forbidden. They may vary in terms of their practice, in terms of their frequency, or in terms of their magnitude in the societies. Like some of the traditional societies are still following some of the mythological beliefs, whereas at the same time, these some of the beliefs are also being practiced in the modern societies as well. They are considered as objectionable. Like spell in some of the traditional societies is so common in the previous times, but now considered as objectionable and strictly forbidden. But as well as these uh, some of the norms will exist at sometimes as well, like cannibalism is a kind of concept, beliefs in the witches, and such many type of things which are sometimes part of the societies which are actually considered as taboos. After Murray's, the important aspect of the culture is basically symbols, and these symbols are central to our understanding and sharing of culture. So, what is a symbol? It is something that stands for, represents, or signifies something else in a particular culture rather than referring a direct phenomena in any of the culture. One can use some of the symbols which can represent, signifies, or share a culture in that specific members of the society or in other part of the world's culture. It can represent, for example, your ideas, emotions, values, beliefs, attitudes, or events in any of the society across the global culture. These are some of the examples of the symbols. So symbol can be anything. It can be your gesture, it can be a word, it can be an object, or even an event through which a culture can be represent in any of the other culture or in any of the member of the society. So sharing symbols can be help to build a sense of unity and commitment among people. There are certain symbols. Now it is again important to understand there are certain kind of phenomena upon which a society is united. Symbol are some of those entities upon which a society can be into a conscience, into a collective representation, or into some of the social. These are some of the social currents as well, which provide a society a life in any of the times. So sharing symbols can help to build a sense of unity, like some of the rituals in any of the society may be performed to propagate the unity among the members of any society. Again, in the traditional or the modern ones, in any kind of society. The meaning of symbols derives from the way they are interpreted within a culture. In every society, symbols may vary in terms of their understanding by its members. So, it is again important to understand that symbols may vary in terms of their derivation and in terms of their interpretation, how people do understand the culture. For example, our clothing styles, our food patterns, our behaviors, in some of the situation might be considered as inappropriate, but in some of the society may be considered as appropriate one. Again, on the basis of the makeup of the culture, how a culture is there, whether a traditional one, whether a rigid one, whether an inflexible one, or a broad one, or flexible one. So symbols may take on different meanings in different times. or circumstances. In some of the situations, some of the things which may were considered as forbidden or inappropriate or ridicule even in some times, in some of the times they might be the most appropriate one for its members. So some symbols are purposely given new meanings over the time. There are a lot of things in the society which may change over the period of time. Just to consider the importance of symbol in that specific society. So after symbols, we may move towards the last element of the culture, that is our language. So language, another major component of a culture and a special kind of symbol, which is a system of symbols that allows communication among members of a culture. It is the most important one in some of the sociologists as an element of the culture, as a medium of promoting a culture's belief among its own members and in some of the other societies' culture as well. It is a system of symbols through which we can communicate with each other in order to understand our culture in that specific society, as well as through the language we can understand the cultures of the other societies as well. So these symbols can be verbal or written in the form of a language. These symbols can be verbal or written. We can speak some of the symbols, we can write some of the symbols, but language is central to the way we understand our world. It is basically a depiction of our perception, our ideologies, and our understanding not only of our own culture, but at the same time the other cultures as well. So, according to the linguistic relativity hypothesis, languages reflects culture's perceptions. These languages are basically the perceptions of the culture through which we are communicating with each other. These are the representation of that specific culture. Uh, and again, these languages are important to understand that they are varying enormously over the period of time. For once, for example, it was considered as the variation in any of the specific dialect in the domestic culture may happen after around 80 to 90 kilometers, but nowadays it is that much fast that in the traditional societies, even after every 5 to 10 or 15 kilometers, you may feel a clear change in the dialect of the language, and upon the basis of that specific change in the language you may feel a change in the cultural setting as well. So by saying this, we can understand that language reflect cultural perceptions. So languages also defines at least some extent how we think out the world and how we act. These are basically, as what we are saying earlier, that these are the perceptions, and as we do perceive the things we act accordingly. One of the most old saying that these words were just noises and remain noises until if we are not giving them a reality. As we do give them a reality, these had become some words like friends or enemies, good or bad. These are some of the things which are basically become real by our interactions, by our languages. So, language is ultimately important to understand the cultural reflections, the cultural perceptions, not only in the domestic society, that's a respective society, but also in the other societies as well. So, so that was all about the elements of culture. Thank you so much for listening me and appreciating me over the time. I would request you to please do subscribe my channel and not only subscribe but also comment upon my lectures and do like these as well. Thank you so much.